On Christmas Eve of 1945, the Sodder family of Fayetteville, West Virginia, became the focus of a mystery that has remained unsolved for 80 years. The Sodder family, who had moved to Fayetteville in the early 1940s as a result of Fayetteville's large Italian population, consisted of 49-year-old George Sodder, 42-year-old Jenny Sodder, and their 10 children: 23-year-old John, 17-year-old Marion, 16-year-old George Jr., 14-year-old Maurice, 12-year-old Martha, 9-year-old Louis, 8-year-old Jenny, 5-year-old Betty, and 2-year-old Sylvia. George Sodder was born Giorgio Sadu in Sardinia, Italy in 1895. George emigrated to the U.S. in 1908 and started working on the railways in Pennsylvania. He later moved to Smithers, West Virginia, where he opened a trucking company. In the early 1920s, George met the daughter of a local store owner, Jenny Cipriani, whom he later married, and for 20 years the Sodder family's lives seemed normal. This changed in early 1945 when George had an odd interaction. A man knocked on the door asking if George could haul something for him. They started talking as they walked around the house. The man then looked at their fuse box and claimed that someday it would start a fire, which George found strange as he had gotten the wiring checked recently, and it seemed fine. George brushed off this interaction and went on with his life, until an insurance salesman knocked on their door. When George declined, the salesman became enraged and threatened George with things such as his house catching fire or his children being, quote unquote, destroyed. He ended the tirade with the quote, "You are going to be paid for the dirty remarks you have been making about Benito Mussolini." George had been an outspoken member of the community on many topics, including his hatred of fascist Italy, which made some members of his community dislike him. He ignored the man and went on with his life. George wasn't the only Sodder who had strange interactions, though. The rest of the family talked about seeing a suspicious car parked near the Sodder house, with the occupants of the car watching the children come home from school. Just after midnight on Christmas morning, the Sodder family got a phone call. Jenny answered it and heard a woman she did not know asking for an unfamiliar person, so she hung up and went back to bed. She woke shortly to a bang and a rolling sound coming from the roof of her house. She woke at 1 in the morning to smoke in her room. She, George, the 4 oldest children, who were asleep on the first floor, and Sylvia escaped the house fire. George ran back to the house to grab a ladder to take the children from the second floor, but it wasn't in the usual spot he had it, so he ran to get one of his trucks from his office so he could climb to the second floor, though neither of his trucks would start, even though he had checked them the night prior. Marion ran to the neighbors to see if they could call the fire department, though the call would not go through. Another neighbor tried calling, but their phone also didn't work. Eventually, the neighbor was able to find Fire Chief F.J. Morris, who was able to call the rest of the fire department. But by the time they got to the Sodder house, it was already 8 in the morning, and the house was destroyed. The family searched the ruins of the house on Christmas Day, but they couldn't find the remains of their children. Morris suggested that they may have been cremated by the fire, but Jenny did tests where she lit animal bones on fire, and the bones remained. An employee of a crematorium later told her that the bones remain after being burned for 2 hours at 2,000 degrees, while the house fire only lasted for 45 minutes. After the fire, a number of strange details emerged. A telephone repairman told George that the phone line appeared as if it had been cut instead of burned. The fire itself was officially the result of faulty wiring, but the Sodders claimed that they couldn't be the case due to the electricity working perfectly before the fire started. A private investigator hired by the Sodders, named C.C. Tinsley, discovered that the insurance salesman, who had spoken to George months before the fire, was also a member of the jury that concluded that the fire was accidental. He also discovered that Morris had confessed to having discovered an organ in the rubble, but he put it in a box and buried it. When the Sodders dug up the box, they took the organ to the funeral director, but they discovered that it was a cow's liver and had not been in the fire. The family later heard other rumors that Morris had hidden the liver in hopes they would stop investigating. In 1949, the Sodders had another examination of the site done, where they found human vertebrae. The vertebrae ended up being of those from a 16 to 22-year-old, which would be impossible as the oldest missing child was only 14. The vertebrae also showed no signs of being in the fire, and it was later assumed that the vertebrae were from the soil that George Sodder had bought to fill up the space left from the home's basement when he was making the family's memorial. Throughout the years, there have been supposed sightings of the Sodder children, but unfortunately, no evidence of them has been found. If you like the video, please subscribe and leave a like. Comment down below if you have any suggestions for video ideas, or email them to historicalobscurities@gmail.com. Goodbye. If you like the video, please subscribe and leave a like. If you have any suggestions for videos, comment them down below, or email them to historicalobscurities@gmail.com. Goodbye.